Been quite a while, hasn't it, Ash?
It has, and welcome back to our fellow listeners, whoever stayed on. It's been nearly a year. Lots has happened.
Yeah, I think
You become a father,
yes, yes.
so
It's a
yeah,
big change. Yep.
it's a big change. Yeah, yeah. I got more Lego.
You got you got a new
Equally
background.
challenging. Got a new background exactly. We had an extension built, so
Yeah,
yes, it's been a whirlwind of a year, hasn't it?
yeah. And to be
Lots
honest, I
good.
think I think we might just be talking to ourselves. We'll have
Well,
to.
I
We'll have
hope I
to.
hope not.
Yeah.
I hope there's been someone waiting now who's subscribed that are going to get the notification that a new episode has dropped.
The Artless dialogue is back.
That Alice dialogues, and it's quite funny because I was in London at an event, and a senior banking individual, like very senior, came up to me and said, "Oh, I love your podcast." And I was like, "Oh, really? You listen to it?" And they were like, "Yeah, yeah. Don't sound surprised. I like the stuff you talk about, and I like the interesting sort of angles you come at on some of these topics." So I was like, "Fantastic, great, good timing for us to have our new one."
Some
Um,
some someone literally just asked me today, South, how's your podcast going? I'm like, we're going to record an episode after a year, and so
Fantastic. Well,
yeah.
there you go. It's the right time. It's the right time. So, what are we
Perfect.
talking about today, Sal? What's on your mind?
So 2 months ago, FIFA announced that Saudi Arabia will be hosting the World Cup in 2034. And that was quite interesting news, considering we know Cristiano Ronaldo went to Saudi Arabia, he's playing for a club, they're attracting a lot of football players, they're making a lot of moves with their, I think, 2030 vision. So I found that news quite interesting, and it got me thinking, why would a country want to host the World Cup? Like, what's in it for them apart from, if they enjoy football? And I went down this small rabbit hole, and I'll just jump into it.
Yeah, tell me more.
So I think giving some background before we jump into the World Cup, Saudi Arabia has this 2030 vision in which they want to revamp their
Yep,
country's economic diversification. They want to revamp their
yep,
image, and they basically want to make it a more accessible place for everyone in the world. They want people to come. They want businesses to come. They want money to come in. They've been primarily dependent on oil, of course, and
yeah,
now
yeah,
they're
yeah,
trying to move outwards. They've invested in sports, boxing, Formula One, MMA, not football. They've started work in the third sector. They plan on increasing tourism. They're building cities. You might have heard of NEOM, the Red
yeah, yeah,
Sea.
yeah,
NEOM, yeah, NEOM, the Red Sea project and stuff. So they're doing
yeah,
quite a bit of that, and the World Cup
yeah,
just fits in perfectly with their strategy.
yeah. And we were in Dubai last year,
Yeah,
and it's no matter when you go to like Dubai or Abu Dhabi or any place like that, the construction, the amount of construction is crazy.
yeah,
And it's interesting because I was reading about, like, to your point about the strategy. They're in a fortunate kind of position in the sense they can plan many years in advance. So they build roads for 10 years in the future. They build, buildings or infrastructure for the future.
yeah.
And they've got this kind of really kind of clever approach to make it future proof.
Hmm.
So, obviously, living in the UK, it's an old country. It's been around for a long time. So it's very expensive to do anything because the infrastructure's so old. And so as soon as you decide to do something, it just costs you billions. And, HS2 is a classic example of that, which is, if you think about a scheme of things, it's a small amount of rail track, if
Yeah,
you compare it to like America or Russia or China, much bigger countries. But the cost was like, in the tens of billions,
yes.
to the point where eventually we just, decided we're going to go halfway, and then we just went, right, that's far enough. However, obviously, different setup, different political environment, but there's a benefit to it in the sense you can make these long-term strategic decisions and then have the continual investment in it, which I think, parallels to, our world of banking.
Hmm.
Often that's difficult because it's a annual sort of cycle of
Yep,
investment.
yep.
And obviously if you're an old bank or financial institution, you have legacy,
Hmm.
and it's a lot harder to be agile. Whereas, countries like Saudi are newish countries in the scheme of things, a lot more agility to develop in that sort of space.
Yeah, no, just adding to what you said, back home in Pakistan, my our house is like 50 or 60 years old, and the
Yeah,
wiring within it's a mess. And they
yeah, yeah,
said it'll be more expensive to fix the wiring
yeah,
instead of installing just a new one around it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
mean that's the thing. Sometimes it's harder to make something old better, easier to just
Yes.
build a new one. And I think they've got the resources and I guess the time, the political and economic time to build it up. And I guess that's what
Yeah.
they're doing. And I think it's interesting as well because Qatar hosted the World Cup in 2022,
Yes.
and they spent what was it, $220 billion on it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
And well, we can expect similar figures from Saudi Arabia as well. And the
yeah,
the thing with projects like these is they can inflate very quickly. Like before you
yeah.
know
Oh
it,
yeah,
like it's I
yeah,
think it's one of the biggest risks. Like whatever the benefits they're getting in terms of
yeah,
improving soft power, improving their image to the world, improving tourism,
yeah,
attracting more people, the risks are quite big in
yeah,
terms of financial constraints as well. If you look at other similar examples, like if you look at Birmingham City Council,
yeah,
they went bankrupt in 23.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
A part of it was due to hosting the Commonwealth Games in 2022 and not
yes,
generating enough revenue to cover up their financing their commitments and obligations.
yeah.
So
And
I
that's
think
always yeah. Sorry, Sal, because that's always a kind of criticism with like cities hosting like the Olympics and London 2012 and it's often yes, it's great when it's on.
mm,
And for that year, your revenue for tourism is up, your revenue for, anything in that kind of social and entertainment space is up.
yeah,
But if you stretch it out over the long term, is it genuinely a benefit for that city? Or actually, does it then, do you then get, all this debt, which you then need to manage for decades afterwards?
yeah.
And it's tricky because it's going short term gain or is it really long term gain? And is it worth doing? Yeah,
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, on your point on cities, I think that's very valid because city has less resources, it has less
yeah,
strategic options, and
yeah,
the benefit would be very limited as well. If
yeah,
it's a whole country pooling its
yes.
resources, then it's a different story
Yeah,
because
especially when it's like when you're capital rich. I mean,
yeah,
that you're trying to do a different thing because like with cities like London or Barcelona, and you kind of go. People know London, people know Barcelona, and they are countries that already have sort of reputations and credibility
yeah,
in that sense. So it's interesting you mentioned Qatar because obviously there was a lot of challenges when Qatar got the World Cup, and there was a lot of kind of questions as to why Qatar, and it felt like a bit of a random sort of country hosting the World Cup because it didn't have a history of it.
yeah,
But you can see now, if you look at a lot of the advertising,
mm,
Qatar is heavily advertising in every place around, airlines and tourism, and you see it advertising, to businesses, large corporates, large institutions. So to your point, there was a strategic outcome it was targeting. It
yeah,
might not have been obvious to people up front because they just focused on the football.
mm,
But the reality is you've put Qatar on the map now,
yeah,
and people know where it is and what it does. So now that name suddenly is synonymous with a thing.
mm,
Whereas before, the World Cup, probably a lot of people wouldn't have known what Qatar was or where it was.
there
You
it
couldn't have
was.
pointed it on a map,
Yep,
certainly. And now
yep.
people are like, I know exactly where it is, and I even know something about it. So in that sense, it succeeded for him.
Yes, no, I think both the 2022 World Cup with Qatar and the one with Saudi Arabia, they've got a lot of similarities in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah,
capital funding, in terms of risks. There are risks and challenges with the Saudi Arabia one as well. An example is they've got 4 stadiums built out of
yeah,
the 12 or 15 that they've planned.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that poses opportunity and threat. The opportunity that thing provides is basically more employment, more
yeah,
projects. You're going to build stadiums, you're going to build tourism facilities, hotels, restaurants, entertainment
yeah,
around it, infrastructure around it. So
yeah.
that's a lot of jobs, a lot of development for the country as a whole. And then the risks are uh, human rights,
Yes, of
labor
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
rights,
yeah,
and then obviously projects scope creep. Like, I mean, if you've
yeah,
got 10 projects left, big, large, mega projects left, and you've got
yeah,
time
yeah,
constraint, the natural thing is put more money into it, so it happens quickly. And then
Yeah.
that 220 billion could go into 250, 260 billion. That's a
Yeah.
different story altogether.
Yeah, and I think you're right in terms of like infrastructure has got such a long lead time
Yeah.
that it's not the thing you want to react to. You never want to be in a position where you're having to respond quickly to an infrastructure challenge because you know for a fact it's going to cost you a lot of money and you're never going to be able to deliver it quickly.
Yep.
And so it is anticipating where you think some of those things are going to happen and preempting it. And I forget which World Cup it was. I think it was one in the European countries where the stadiums were there, everything was great, apart from the infrastructure, i.e., roads and all the rest of it. And as you said, you end up the World Cup is split across many sort of cities and regions. Some of them, who've got existing big clubs there, they can handle that because they're used to 80,000 people.
Yeah.
Suddenly you go to an area where it's a beautiful stadium, but they're used to 6,000 people, and suddenly 200,000 people turn up. And the infrastructure just ceases and it stands it's at a standstill. And you see that in and following up back to the kind of the parallels of the financial sector, where you've got an aspiration to have AI or an aspiration to use data, but your infrastructure is so slow and so far behind that you commit to the automation and then you realize you put unnecessary strain on the infrastructure, which then struggles to keep up with that because suddenly, if you're using AI, it needs far more, processing power. It needs all of this stuff, and your infrastructure is not quite ready for it. So it's about kind of, how you accelerate both, but with one, it's a much longer lead time. So you need to be much more forward thinking while anticipating these little quick, agile things that may turn up, opportunities that may turn up that you can only get the benefit of if you've thought through the infrastructure.
Yeah, no, that's quite an interesting point because if you think about it, if you think about one person and all their touch points with the World Cup, it would be from buying tickets to booking travel to booking accommodation to actually physically traveling, passing through the airport, resources, entertainment, food, the stadium, all those touch points, they will be at their most stressed when thousands, hundreds and thousands of people would be coming in. And for Saudi Arabia, maybe they've not seen that many people come in such a small amount of time and in those locations. So that would be a big test on what they've built.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see be in the room when they do the scenario analysis, because I imagine they must do. It must be, I'd love to kind of be there because to that point hospitals and all sorts of stuff, because you've suddenly got if suddenly there's a virus and a stomach bug spreads and we've seen with COVID, etc., how quickly that kind of escalates. And then you've now suddenly got a country that's expecting X amount, a day, a week, times that now by 100. And then you go, right, at what point is your scenario too stressed that you can't handle it versus you built some, some capacity in that to go, right, I'm expecting some increase, but not too much to the point it's going to break the system.
No. I don't even know how you'd go about identifying those risks and then coming up
with solutions.
Sounds fun, yeah. I guess they're
not the fixing part. Yeah, not the fixing part. Just coming up with the worries. With
problems.
I love coming up with worries.
And then hiring consultants to fix them, or
just kind of passing it on to somebody else. Like, why don't you fix it? I'm just going to come over and tell you what could go wrong.
I guess that happens at some point.
It does indeed. It does indeed.
Yeah. One question when I was thinking about the World Cup and Saudi Arabia was that, and you touched.
If your question is, am I going to support England or Scotland? Then I refuse to answer. But I will be supporting England. But if that wasn't your question, that's fine.
I didn't think
be banned from Scotland now.
Didn't think of that. But what I was thinking was initially when you mentioned that it's easier to build something new.
Yeah,
I was thinking. So Saudi Arabia was the only bidder for this World Cup.
Really?
Yeah, and
that surprises me.
That got me thinking: is it because of the capital expenditure needed? I mean, I think that's the only reason That makes sense, right? Like, I mean,
It must be. It must be.
or could it be the stress on existing services or infrastructure in let's say developed countries, countries that have hosted
Yeah,
sports events in the past?
I think it's probably. I think you're probably right. It's probably a combination because the cost certainly, obviously, for established countries that have football in there, like if you think about the UK, you wouldn't necessarily need to build stadiums
Hmm.
because you have large, 100,000, 80,000 stadiums in the UK, so you could host the World Cup here. But trains, buses, roads, infrastructure would be the bit that would cause you chaos
Hmm.
because from a political standpoint, you're probably going to generate some income, additional income for that period of time because you're not really having a capital outlay.
Yeah.
But if you're not a football fan and you're trying to go to work, and then for 3 to 4 weeks that's disrupted,
Yeah.
then there's the cost to the economy because of that disruption, which might include, delivery services. Think about all the people that use the roads. That's the arterial roads for the country to keep it moving.
Hmm.
And so suddenly, if that's at a standstill, then there's all the knock-on effect. So I think back to that kind of again the scenarios. I imagine someone somewhere has got some clever modelling on this and said on average, if you host a World Cup, Manchester, for example, you've got Old Trafford Stadium that has 80,000 every Saturday, and fair enough, there's an hour or two of extra traffic, but people come in and out of that stadium effortlessly
Yeah.
every week
Hmm.
out, right? So it obviously can handle that amount.
Hmm.
Where it obviously then the scenario breaks is hundreds of thousands turn up to experience the atmosphere without tickets. So then they're the ones sitting in, like the big open squares and just
Hmm.
sitting in place because they just want to be there,
Yeah.
but they don't really have tickets.
That's
And
true.
that's what kind of causes the issues. And, we saw that in Paris at the Olympics,
Hmm.
where it wasn't,
So,
because a lot of the stadiums were half empty in some cases. So,
yeah.
they're struggling to sell tickets, but hundreds of people, thousands of people were just filling, a city that's very old, like the UK, beautiful historic city, but really not built for large volumes of people to move around in. And that caused a lot of the issues, which was just the fact that they had nowhere to go. Even silly things like bathrooms.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you go like if you I forgot what someone did this. I saw it on the internet. It was quite funny, and it kind of said if you look at a square kilometer, say in Paris, and you worked out how many bathrooms there were, in restaurants, hotel chains, all that sort of stuff, then they did like a kind of a ratio people to
People.
bathrooms.
Yeah.
And they basically kind of said, statistics, it went from, I don't know, one in 100 or whatever it was to suddenly one in
Oh
10,000.
wow.
So suddenly you go, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So suddenly even that thing stopping and breaking, can you imagine the chaos that creates? Where suddenly you've got thousands of people who need to go to the bathroom who can't, and then you suddenly go to the logistics. Well, that affects your sewer systems. That affects this. That affects obviously health because people are then going elsewhere to
Hmm.
use the bathroom. It's just that's one element of lots of potential challenges that could be created that you might not immediately consider.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. Like, I mean, a lot of people would just want to be a part of the environment, the celebrations,
Yes.
the everything that's going on around the World Cup, even if
Yes.
I think that's exciting as well. That's true. Plus,
Yeah.
something also came to mind was that we recently just got done with COVID,
Yes.
and all the supply chain issues that have been going on for the past few years. I think economies are generally, the world economy is like
Yeah.
struggling. They're just coming out of it, just getting back to normal. I don't think
Yeah.
any economy is in a place to put in billions of dollars into a certain pocket for
Yes.
the long term. Because I mean, if you're planning 10 years in advance, most democracies wouldn't be thinking 10 years in advance. They'd be thinking for the next election cycle, if that makes sense.
I agree, and you're right, and it's like it's kind of political suicide if you just suddenly have said, "Well, I'm
Going,
bidding for the World Cup, by the way,"
yeah, and
and
we're taking on.
yeah, fingers crossed, it's all
Yeah.
fine. yeah, that's a brave stance to have.
Yes.
Because you either need to be a country with a lot of capital, where you're kind of going, my issue isn't capital,
Yeah.
my issue is diversification,
Yep.
and Saudi Arabia, China, certain parts of South America, capital's not their issue.
Hmm.
And it's diversification. And in your opening, as you said, like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Qatar, they're diversified into investment and financial institutions. And you see, just like London and Canary Wharf, you go to Dubai and it looks like New York now, and
Yeah.
it's all the brand names are up there, and Microsoft and IBM and all the big banks are there. So it does look like a city you would find, like a Western city, so to speak, that's
Hmm.
very established. So
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's not like Dubai from 10 years ago even, and so it's almost they've now evolved beyond. It's just a travel destination. Well, it's
Hmm.
not a travel destination. It's
It's
established,
economic center.
city state, yeah, economic center, and they're very well positioned as Saudi Arabia because they're kind of globally quite central.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other bit that's really kind of clever with their strategy is a lot of flights go through Dubai
That's a good one.
or
Yeah.
Qatar.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what? And so you kind of like you're
Convenient.
subconsciously it's convenient, and so you do a layover in Dubai or Qatar and stuff, and whether you're going anywhere, you're going to the east from the west, and you're passing through this one small city state or a few city states. So they're clever in the way they've kind of done lots of strategic things, which if you looked at them individually,
Yeah.
seems like a different decision. But when you look at it and take a step back and look collectively, you think that's pretty clever. How it all kind of suddenly coalesces. And if you think about the size of these countries, they are small countries in the scheme of things compared to like the States and China or Russia in terms of actual size, but their influence, a bit like the UK, is disproportionate compared to the size of the country.
Yes, no, I agree, especially with that part in saying there's a lot of small, complex strategic decisions that they made
Yeah,
over time, and they're
yeah,
all coming together. I think that's the beauty of a long-term vision. And when you're looking at
yeah,
the vision and making something happen, if you look at going back to Saudi Arabia again, if you look at Saudi
yeah.
Arabia, they had the 2030 vision. They're inviting foreign direct investment in. They're
Yes,
building up entertainment spaces, hotels, infrastructure, and they've been doing that for the past 10 years.
yes.
They've had several successful sporting entertainment events in the country. It's like they're
Yeah.
warming up for the World Cup
Yeah,
already.
yeah, yeah. They've done the practice run, and yeah, you're quite right. And they've gone, yeah, we're ready now for the big thing. So definitely. So you say that was 2034?
The World Cup's in 2034. The vision is 2030. So
Okay, okay,
around
right,
about the
right,
same
right.
time, in 5 4 years.
I'm just seeing if I need to book my flights for 2034.
The good thing about the central location is if you're going to Dubai or anywhere, you can just stop over, watch a few games of the
Yeah,
World Cup, and then
exactly. That's what I was thinking. Well, if they need someone help with some of the scenarios, we're here available.
yes,
And our fee will only be just front row tickets to the matches.
I've heard
That's all.
I've heard they provide very good packages, so might be worth
There you
looking
go.
into.
Right, done, done. I think that's probably an opportune time to wrap this episode up, Sound. So I think that was
Yep.
a brilliant, interesting topic. Lots of parallels with like different sectors in there, and as with all these kind of topics, the more you kind of hit beneath the surface, there's just so many layers to it.
Yeah.
So no, that was a great one to choose.
Yeah, and I think on a personal level as well, I think the first episode after I think more than a year didn't
Yeah,
went fine, I think.
yeah.
Um,
We stretched our muscles. We're ready and warmed up now.
yes. Okay then.
Perfect. Right. Take
Perfect.
care, Sound. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone. Hope
Bye
you're
bye.
okay. Bye bye.